the more we have invested into something, the less likely we are to let it fail. The more we have invested into something, the less likely we are to let it fail. And this explains a lot of things, right? Like, this explains why it's hard to lose a loved one, because we have so much invested time and energy in with that relationship, it's hard to just let that go. It explains why it's hard for family businesses to pass from one generation to the next, because you have the whole identity of the original owner wrapped up in the business. Understanding this pragmatically makes a lot of sense, or logically makes a lot of sense, but living by it pragmatically, practically, is something that most of us don't do. Because if this is true, then what it suggests is that when it becomes difficult to follow through on a commitment, we should increase our investment into that commitment. When it becomes difficult to achieve the goal, we should increase the investment, because the more we have invested, the less likely we are to let it fail. Ironically, that is exactly the opposite of what most people in the escalator world do. Most people keep our commitments conditionally. We keep our commitments as long as they are convenient to do so. But the moment it becomes inconvenient to follow through on our commitment, we typically start to challenge and question ourselves and say, you know what, maybe it would be easier to go do some other job, or do some other goal, or pursue some other workout program, or whatever, or some other relationship. And we talk ourselves into this fantasy that somehow it's easier somewhere else. What the ultra performers do is they double down. They increase the investment, more personal development, more time, more prayer, more energy, more focus, more work, as they know the more that they put into that, the less likely they are to let it fail. Visually, it looks like this. Okay, this is called the commitment continuum, and this is meant to be a visual depiction that codifies the thought process that ultra performers go through that is different from everybody else. And so it works this way. Whenever we are faced with a decision about following through on our goal, on our commitment, what happens is there's this internal conversation about whether or not we should keep pursuing it. And there are two types of energy that are expended in that calculation. The first type of energy is the one that we all think about, which is the physical energy required to execute that commitment. Let me give you an example, right? So let's say that at some point in your life, hypothetically, you made a New Year's resolution, or a resolution in general, to lose a little weight. Okay? Hypothetically. And my mom always tells me, she says, Rory, don't you look at anybody when you're saying that. They'll think you're looking at them. So I always look up when I say that one. I'm not looking at anybody. I'm just saying. So let's say we made that resolution, right? And today is the day, now's the time to go to the gym. The thought process for most of us in our heads sounds something like this. See if this sounds familiar. We sit there and we say to ourselves, do I feel like working out right now? And friends, what is almost always the answer to that question? No, I do not feel like working out right now, or ever, as a matter of fact. And for most of us, that is the end of the conversation. Well, what we learned from the ultra performers is that there is actually a second type of energy neurologically that's being expended in our decision-making process that most of us aren't aware of because it's subconscious. It's not physical energy, it's emotional energy. What we learned is that there is emotional energy expended in simply making the decision that is in addition to and above and beyond the physical energy required to execute the decision. In fact, very often, the emotional energy of making the decision is much greater than the physical energy required to execute the decision. When I went door to door, we used to have this phrase, we used to say the toughest door to open is the car door. Right? It wasn't hard to get into Mrs. Jones's house. That wasn't the hardest door to open. The hardest door is getting your own butt out of your own car. That is the hard part, because we have this battle that plays in our mind, this like of epic proportions of how horrible this could be and all the horrible things that could happen, and we let our imagination just wander. So the thing to realize is that doesn't mean you're abnormal. It means you're very normal. It just means you have to train your brain to understand what's happening, which is that there is emotional energy being expended that is clouding the whole decision-making process, making it feel much more difficult than it actually is. Think about it this way. It's not getting ourselves onto the treadmill once we're at the gym that's the hard part. It's when we're sitting on the couch deciding and debating about whether or not we should even go. And that was one of the things, I used to be 45 pounds heavier than I am right now. And one of the things that helped me was when I learned this, what I started to do is I said, all right, here's the deal. I have to get myself to the gym. If I get myself to the gym and I still don't feel like working out when I'm there, I can turn around and come back, which almost never happened. It did happen a couple times, but almost never happened. Because once the decision is made, the context is changed, you're there, the physical energy shows up because it never was a matter of physical energy. It was all this emotional head trash that we were dealing with. And that is what most of us lose to, is the head trash.